What's up, gamer? My name's Uluko, and today we're going to talk about Mageblood, one of the most anticipated new unique items coming to Path of Exile 2 in the Return of the Ancients update. So first of all, for those that don't know, Mageblood is a very popular and very powerful belt from Path of Exile 1. It has an effect that says, magic utility flasks cannot be used, leftmost 2 to 4 magic utility flasks constantly apply their flask effects to you, and magic utility flask effects cannot be removed. So if you haven't played Path of Exile 1 at all, the closest thing to a magic utility flask in Path of Exile 2 would be a charm. So if we were to be as literal as possible when translating Mageblood from a Path of Exile 1 unique to a Path of Exile 2 unique, it would say something along the lines of giving permanent uptime to your charms. Basically, the theme of the belt is turning temporary buffs permanent. That's what we know about Mageblood from how it works in Path of Exile 1, but even though they've announced that it's getting added to the game in Path of Exile 2 this update, they did not give us any of the details about how it'll work because they want players to find it themselves and get excited when they see it for the first time. That said, there are a couple pieces of information that they've given us. First of all, during the Q&A after the content reveal for Return of the Ancients, one of the developers hinted that Mageblood may end up being some kind of a divine sync, which is to say it would have a wide range of possible effects that we would want to use our divine orbs on the item to reroll the values of those effects until we get something that we want. The other piece of information that they've teased us with is this screenshot of a character who has Mageblood equipped with an odd empty socket to the left of their life flask. If you played Path of Exile 1 at all, you may recognize that as the trinket slot that you could unlock by interacting with the heist mechanic. And in this screenshot, if you zoom in on the socket itself, you can see that the socket still has that faded out little trinket icon in there that's identical to the one in Path of Exile 1. Basically, a trinket was just an item that you could get, and it had a couple modifiers on it that would interact with the loot that you get in specific zones for a mechanic called heist. So it would be like, while you're in a heist zone, there's a 3% chance you turn a chaos orb into a exalted orb or something like that, which wouldn't be good in Path of Exile 2 because it would kind of have to be the other way around, but that's besides the point. The thing is, some people are speculating that this extra slot is going to act as a 4th charm slot, and honestly, the developers in the past have kind of talked about the idea of adding more than 3 charm slots, or ways to get more than 3 charm slots, and so it wouldn't be the most surprising thing ever, but I'm not really convinced that this one in particular is a charm slot. It's not the greatest rebuttal to the idea, but currently in Path of Exile 2, if you have an empty charm slot, there's actually no image in the background of the charm slot, and so I feel like if they did add an extra charm slot and they just happened to put it in the same spot in the UI, it would also have no background, so I kind of feel like they're slightly different in some way. The other thing is, I totally wouldn't put it past these developers to include that socket in the screenshot as nothing more than a red herring. So in my opinion, it's either not a charm slot, or it's not real at all. So with all that in mind, I've been speculating about what Mageblood could possibly do in Path of Exile 2, and I've come up with a couple ideas. First of all, the most basic possibility is that it could still give us permanent flasks. So we would have permanent uptime on our life flask, and permanent uptime on our mana flask. I think that one's kind of not that exciting and probably pretty unlikely, especially because in the same update we're getting a chest piece that already gives you permanent uptime on your life flask, and so Mageblood is like a very big deal, very powerful, rare, and expensive item, and so I feel like it needs to do a little more than just give you a life flask and a mana flask. That could be offset by giving your flasks a different effect on top of their normal stuff, which would be something you could randomize through the divine orbs, and that would act as a divine orb sync. But again, I'm not wholly convinced by that idea. Next up, we have the idea that I mentioned earlier, which would be Mageblood giving us permanent charms. It would definitely be useful that way, because charms are powerful, and like, it is nice to be immune to different things, and you could also use it to get some extra resistances and stuff. But like, beyond the implicit modifiers that each type of charm comes with, most of the interesting effects you can get from the normal charms or even the unique charms are like, when this charm is used, get a power charge, or when this charge is used, get like a bunch of guard or something. If you were to use Mageblood to have those charms always active, they would never activate, and so you would never get those kinds of bonuses, which really kind of narrows down the charms that would be useful with a Mageblood, and that doesn't really fit the power fantasy of Mageblood itself, because like I said, it's a huge deal, and it's a build-defining unique all on its own. There are some other ways to improve that idea, like the Mageblood itself could give us extra charm slots beyond the one that looks like a trinket slot from PoE1. When I was thinking about this, I was honestly thinking like, what if they gave us 1 to 3 extra charm slots? So you can actually have up to double the charm slots, and then all 6 of them are active all the time. That would be pretty darn powerful. On top of that, you could get some increased effect percentage, so like if you were using a charm that gave you 25% fire resistance and you had 100% effectiveness on it from your Mageblood, then it would give you 50% resistance, and you could use that to solve a lot of problems pretty easily, or you could use like the gold charm that gives you rarity and just get a boatload of rarity from it instead. Again, the problem with increased effect percentages is that a lot of the charm effects are just immunities, or they're things that happen when you use the charm, and so it's kind of hard to imagine what the increased effect percentages would do for those. If they wanted Mageblood to interact with charms in some way and they wanted to make it a little more interesting, they could also cause Mageblood to activate like new bonded modifiers with different types of charms, kind of like the Shaman has the ability to get bonded modifiers with all the different socketable runes and idols and whatnot. That I could see them doing, a little more than I could see them doing increased effect percentage. But I think if Mageblood does interact with charm slots, it should give us at least 1 or 2 extra beyond the usual 3. So that way it is that like big, huge, build-changing unique that it should be. Those are the more basic and predictable ideas for how Mageblood might work in Path of Exile 2 after seeing it in Path of Exile 1, but I did have one other idea that was kinda out there, though I think it would fit the bill of turning temporary things permanent and being extremely powerful, since it's an extremely rare item anyways, and that would be, what if Mageblood gave us infinite charges of some kind? Basically, if it said something like, you have a permanent pool of 1 to 10 frenzy charges or something, and then anytime you use a skill that consumes those types of charges, you would get the benefits as if you had consumed up to that amount of charges. And then if you use a Divine Orb on it, it randomizes both the number between 1 and 10 and the type of charge that's on the unique, and then it would actually be pretty darn challenging to get your Mageblood into, say, a max roll of the type of charge you want. It would be extremely powerful, but once I thought of the idea, honestly, all I could think about was infinite Flicker Strike without having to worry about generating charges at all, and I kind of started wishing that that's the way it would work. But there's no real way for us to know, honestly, either until someone data mines it or finds it in the league and posts it on Reddit or something. So I don't know, those are just my ideas for how Mageblood might work. What do you think it's gonna do? Is the extra trinket slot a red herring, or is it like guaranteed to be some kind of charm effect? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe for more like it. Lastly, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.